Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Superman and Lois. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I really like this kind of, as the title kind of talks about, like a brief remembrance. I really like that we kind of like, we saw these scenes in like the first episode, but we kind of got like more context with a lot of stuff. Like, obviously, I was kind of surprised, like, when we see like Clark, like in the, like, obviously when he finds, you know, the Fortress of Solitude and everything, but like I thought that was so interesting because I think in my head when he left Smallville, I thought he was going to Metropolis. It's like, no, this makes sense. It's interesting to know that his life in Metropolis doesn't start until like well after the fact. Like he goes to like figuring out everything that he is. Like he goes through the Fortress of Solitude. He meets his father. His father tells him all about Krypton and who he is and what he's capable of, and he learns to control his powers. And I love it, just seeing him speeding across the desert as a teen, and then like seeing him become the adult, and then just taking off into the sky. It's like, yeah! And his dad is telling him, like, right, you're here to be this world's champion, but you have to, I've given you the fundamentals on everything, knowing about our planet, why you're here and everything, but ultimately, you have to figure out for yourself why you're going to be, why you need to be, or why you should be this world's champion. And to get that answer, he ends up coming back home. And like I was like, oh, that's yes, and hugging Mama Kent. It's like, oh, that's so good. It's like, the feels and everything. For Clark, you know, he's so happy to be back home, and obviously he's explaining everything to his mom. But I think on some level, Clark, because we don't know how long he was going, but it's definitely been a couple years. He kind of thought maybe he could pick up life where it was, where he kind of left off. So he's like, okay, like, you know, he goes to try and see Lana. There's someone he wanted to see first before he goes off doing his hero thing. But he ran into Lana, but she's already engaged to Kyle. Maybe they're already even married. And it's like, right, you've been gone a long time, and a lot of people had to move on. And obviously he blames himself. He's like, right, I should have been here, Mom. You know, I ended up leaving after Dad died, and I left you alone with all that. But it's like, no, honey, like, you did what you needed to do. Like, you went off to learn what you needed to learn and who you need to be. You know, and she's like, I got a gift for you. And she's like, I had a dream about you flying, but it wasn't the boy I knew. You know, you've become who you are now. And it's like, I made this for you. It's like, need something for the chest. I'm like, oh, this is so cute. And so we get him in Metropolis, and I love, because he, you know, he's a Kansas boy that he is. So it's like, oh, can you give me directions? It's like, oh, can you give me directions? It's like, oh, so people in Metropolis have the like quote unquote stereotype about New Yorkers where it's like, don't ask, don't. It was like, what? You're talking to me? Shut up. Leave me alone. Like, once again, that's the stereotype of New York, so I think Metropolis is kind of modeled after that stereotype. He's just like, wow, like, people aren't friendly here. Like, when you come from a small town like Smallville where everyone knows everyone, and it's just like, always like a, hey, how you doing type of thing, you know? But in that moment, it's like, he hears about something, does the classic Superman run, rips open his shirt with the costume below. Like, we never see him do that, which I'm like, I wonder, does he still do that, or what the case may be. But I love that obviously it's a scene where he saves the kid from the car, and then he pops back afterwards, does the booth thing. I was like, yeah, he did it. He did the booth thing. Yeah. They had to hit it back to back. I mean, this is him OG. This is his, those moments are his year one as Superman, so it's so dope. But it's like, those are the classic Superman things you don't get to see a lot. Because I don't think Kara's ever done this phone booth thing. She's definitely done the whole, like, rip her shirt open, like, revealing that L family crest, but that's about it. Like, so it's just like getting that back to back, like, it's classic Supes. So that's pretty dope. And it's like, oh, what just happened? It's like, oh my god, like some dude just like saved some kid. And it's like, oh, he was flying? Yeah, like a bird or a plane or something. I'm like, was it one? Was it two? We got three. If you could have managed to squeeze in, can leap a building in a single bound faster than a speeding bullet. I mean, I guess technically we got that with him running across the desert, and I guess leaping technically leapt. Well, because I think that was technically supposed to be before Super, because interesting tidbit, if you didn't notice, I made a video talk about this years ago, but I found it fascinating. Superman actually never originally flew in the comic books. Like, when he was originally made, like, that's where the whole leaping in a single bound came from, because he couldn't actually fly. It was actually like a radio thing that threw out like, oh, Superman could fly. Prior to that, it was not canon in the comics, and then later in the comics, they're like, oh yeah, Superman can fly. I think it's kind of like the same thing with Wonder Woman. Like, I don't think most continuities she could fly. That's why she had the invisible jet. She can, but now she can fly in most most continuity would have her flying. Regardless, I just think that's such an interesting tidbit, because it's like, right, because that leaping over a building in a single bound thing doesn't really apply as much anymore because he can fly. I mean, really, also like the whole being. I mean, super speed still comes in handy, but obviously he doesn't have to do the footwork like Flash does. He can fly. So, but I just think it's just so good. And he sees the planet. Obviously, he's meeting with Perry White, and it's just like, and he's like, oh yeah, I might not have any experience, but I'll do whatever you need me to do. He's like, I need you. Well, you do this. Sure. I need you to pick up my clothes on Thursday. Yeah, absolutely, sir. It's like, follow me. And I love that he is kind of like the stumbling country boy to a certain extent. I say that as a country boy myself. I thought it was so neat. Obviously, once again, getting context, like his first meeting with Lois and them talking. And I thought it was interesting because for her, it's like, right. Because it's like, oh yeah, people were talking about that dude, because he doesn't have a name at this point in time. And it's like, yeah, she's like, yeah, but the problem is, people are saving the day and everything, heroics, that's awesome and everything, but it's all anyone's talking about. The fact is, like, being a heroic, like, saving, like, from stuff like that, because at this point in time, he's done a few things, saving the day. So saving that kid wasn't the first thing he did in Metropolis. Like, he'd already been in Metropolis for a while, doing some saving and stuff like that, but it's like he just dominated the news conversation. That's what anyone ever wanted to talk about. But for her, it's like there are more systemic issues going on. Like there's a guy spray painting these Nazi symbols, burning businesses and stuff like that. And Clark's like, right, what can I do to help? And he works with Lois, tirelessly. They're like, right, I can do good as Superman, but there's also, and I think that's such a beautiful thing of like, yeah, Superman can handle like what might be considered the big picture, but there's a lot of stuff that falls through the cracks that as Clark can't, he can help Lois discover. It's like, right, these stories are important too. Like the big stories, big saving the day, sure, but there are issues that are big issues that get like trumped by other things. So I thought that was just like a neat like little thing that they did. And obviously, like, we see Clark and Lois putting their like noses to the grindstone, and they're just like working it. It's nice to kind of really, because obviously we've gotten a look at that a good chunk, like them just, doing the reporter thing. And so it's nice to see them, just early days of them working together as a team and everything. And them kind of like, it's like, right, we've nailed it down. It's got to be one of these suspects. And Clark is like, Lois is like, if I can talk to Perry about getting you like a different like job or like position or whatever. But he's like, no, I actually like where I am. She's like, because of the job or the company? And he was like, I think that's a trick question. I would have thought Clark would have immediately been like both. So I thought that was pretty dope, because she's like, oh, what, you got a hot date or something? He's like, no, it's not like that. Just reruns in Seinfeld and like heating up some like frozen chicken nuggets. That's about it. I'm like, oh, dude, it's so heartwarming and everything. And obviously, he shows up as Superman to help Lois. Because in his mind, it's like, oh, they're taking over the neighborhood. Like, I'm the hero in this situation. And obviously, Clark shows up, blocks the flamethrower, and then, like, freezes it. And the guy's like, you're not fast enough to stop both of these. Throws two grenades in two different directions towards citizens. And, like, Clark heat visions one, grabs the other one, and holds it in his hand. Dude, and Lois comes in with the finisher and tases the dude. He's like, who's the hero now? It's like, dude! And he's like, hi, Miss Slane. She's like, you know me? He's like, yeah, I've been reading your reports about, so like, it's like, okay. And she's like, so who are you? And he's like, I'll leave it to you to give me a name. And takes off. He's like, who was that? And she's like, Superman. I'm like, yeah, because that was also a thing like Kat like held a little bit of a grudge against Lois for. That's why it was like, I'm going to be the one to name Supergirl, because Lois is the one that named Superman. That's why she also tried to name Barry when he first pops up on Earth 38 in Supergirl season 1. But it was like, dude, I love it. I was like, it's just so like heartwarming. It's like, but then like at one point Clark saw something. I was like, what the hell was that? I was like, all right. And then we just kind of take our way down memory lane, like Superman getting interviewed. That's so cool. I mean, because you don't get it that often. Superheroes getting actually interviewed is actually pretty badass. It happens from time to time. I think obviously, did Kate ever Kate got interviewed? Well, Kate did get interviewed because Kara did the interview for her when when Batwoman came out, so people wouldn't get it twisted. It's like, no, this is who I am. Like, so, but it's just interesting, like, just to sit down. Like, I think the closest we've had to like a sit down was like Oliver, like after people found out he was Green Arrow, like when it was publicly known that he was Green Arrow. that's like him having sit downs and stuff like that. It's just so interesting. And like Lois is kind of, it's like, oh, so it brings up, like, oh yeah, my planet was destroyed, I'm here. And she's like, so people think you were born in the US. And he was like, well, don't think that. And he says it, he speaks Cantonese and says it. And she's like, oh, so you know other languages. He's like, don't just assume just because I'm speaking English that I'm from America or whatever. And it's like, oh, he's like, yeah, I was just so fascinated with so many different cultures and stuff like that, I wanted to understand everybody and everything. So I learned multiple languages. He's like, which languages did you learn? He was like, all of them. I'm like, okay, that's dope. Just to know, like, oh yeah, Superman knows every language. That's really interesting. That's pretty dope. And it's like, so why, some of the people want to know why, what are you all about? He's like, being a good and decent person, truth, justice. And she's like, and the American way? And he's like, I think that's just, you trying to get me to admit that I was born here in the US. I'm like, it's so cool. It's so dope. I love it. And it's like, right, Lois is talking to Janet, and Janet's like, oh my God, like, Superman's smiling at you. I think he's super Indian. She's like, no. I'm like, oh, that's super adorable. But at this point in time, we don't know that like her and Clark have been dating for a while. So I thought that was pretty dope. And it's like, she's like, yeah, I've been dating that guy. Like, I'm in love with him. And it's like, what? She's like, yeah, like, I haven't even told him yet. Yeah, he's a bit of a dork, but yeah, I love him. He's just awesome. And it's like, yeah. And then Janet's like, wait, doesn't Superman have like super hearing? So has he? And they both turn and look at him. Clark's just kind of smiling and waving at him, and she's like, oh, because she hasn't told anyone, including Clark, how she feels. And she walks away, and she's just like, we'll finish this later. She's like, that was super unprofessional. He's like, nah, he's a lucky guy. And she's like, don't think I wouldn't. This is going to stop me from going at this interview my way. It's like, no, I'd be disappointed if you didn't. So I was like, oh, dude, that's amazing. And then the later cut to Clark taking her to meet Mama Kit. I'm like, yeah! It's just little moments like that, and like I legitimately got giddy. I think it's so dope that even if the entire episode was just kind of that, like Clark knocked out, kind of remembering stuff like that, I think that's dope. But but I do like that the episode does have a twist on it, because eventually, like, well, Clark, invites Martha. Well, it's like, oh, like Lois is like, Martha was like, Lois, I want you to meet everyone. It's just going to be some people from Bridge Club and stuff. Like, don't worry about it. It's like, okay, cool. Because Lois is like, what if your mom doesn't like me? It's like, why wouldn't she? She's like, there's a lot of mail I get from people who don't like me, So, but obviously Martha, like, it's just so good. And it's like, I brought her here. It's like, what, just to meet me? It's like, no, to tell her who I really am. Are you sure? Because once you open that box, there's no going back. He's like, no, like, I've known since the moment I first met her. And she's like, I'm so proud of you, son. I'm like, and he shows her who he is, and we get some of those scenes, and it's just, I don't know, it's beautiful, the wedding, even Clark being like, oh, Dad, I wish you could have been at the wedding, hologram or not, because for him, he says, like, I, I've gone my entire life never telling any of my friends, not telling anyone my secret, but now I know what it is, so that I could share it with you, and we could build a life together. I'm like, dude, it's super sweet. And the fact is that, but then, like, Jor-El kind of glitches out. He's like, you have to run from here. And I'm like, what? And then, like, his memories, like, flash forward him to, like, Lois telling him he's pregnant. And you can tell, like, wait, something's not right here, because the memory's continuing, but he's kind of breaking the fourth wall a little bit. Like, no, Lois, something just weird just happened. And it's like, she's like, I want to have a girl. And then finding out, oh, not only is she not having a girl, she's having twin boys. She's like, this is what I get for wishing I had a girl. I thought that was amazing. But then it's like, wait, things aren't right here. And then, like, he sees Morgan, and he's like, none of this is real. It's like Morgan's implanting himself into Clark's memories. It's like, wait. He's like, now I know who you are. I was like, dude, I love that twist of, like, right. It isn't just filling in some gaps like that, which, like I said, an episode all in that anyway, like, filling in some of those gaps even more. Sure, I would have been down for that anyway, just getting, like, more heartwarming moments. But it plays into the story because, like, now Morgan knows so much about Clark's life. He needed to understand why his brother chose humanity over his Kryptonian brethren, the Sistren. And it's like, now I see why. You chose humanity over us. Like, now I know, like, oh, about your children. He's like, please don't hurt my sons. Like, I've never hurt infants. Now, teenage boys, that's a different question, And Clark snaps out of it and wakes up, and it's like, for Morgan, it's like, I wanted to understand, but this weakness, now I get it. You chose a pathetic human family over Krypton. And it's like, don't assume like you know anything about him. He's like, I know everything I need to know. But that's the thing, because of his, we kind of learned later on, because of his rough upbringing, he like, the thing is, Clark was raised with love. Morgan wasn't. Morgan was, well, love for simply Krypton, whereas Clark was raised to love everyone, both by his biological parents, well, by his dad, as well as, you know, Martha and Jonathan. They raised him to be who he is. He has the values he had. Sadly, Morgan didn't have that. He didn't have anyone to be that centerfold for him. Because also Clark grew up not knowing Krypton, so you can make the argument. But also it's like, well, Kara ended up the way she did, having the right examples around her, the family that raised her. So, you know, having the family that was built around her helped her. So it showcases it is a nature versus nurture thing. I mean, once again, that's the whole Red Sun storyline in the beginning, just to be a nature versus nurture, which obviously it showcases that it's a combination of two that make people who they are. It's not, it's a little bit of nature, but also nature can be overwritten by nurture, but sometimes it can't be. Like, some things are just so ingrained in your DNA, it's hard to, you know, and who's to say what Morgan's story would have been, different circumstances, if he was met with love instead of fear, you know, because Jonathan and Martha embraced Clark, whereas like the people who found him pulled a shotgun and tried to hurt him. So, and then being chased out and locked away, of course that's going to make you look at humans as disgusting and terrible. It's like, they didn't embrace me. I'm sure he looks at Clark with resentment. It's like, this world embraced you and they hated me. It's like, also, it's like, right, because you also had the benefit, you know, I hid my identity not out of shame, out of survival, out of need to stay hidden. You do it. He's trying to say, like, yeah, if you really felt that way, you'd be out and about. But obviously, granted, it's like he's made so many enemies, not just the world. Some of the world can be trusted with that, but not everyone can. And so for Clark, he doesn't want to put the people, you know, superhero 101, not putting the people you care about in danger. So I thought it was that confrontation, is it even Clark being like, our mom, I talked to her, she believes there's still good in you. And he was like, right, like, it's like, that man over there, Jor-El, corrupted our mother into believing this nonsense. And so for him, it's like, I'm going to destroy everything. I'm going to shout your secret identity to the world. I was like, no, don't drag my family into this. This is between you and me. He's just like, he's like, what do you want? He's like, I want you to submit to me. But Clark's like, I can't do that. And you know, it's like, fine, I will take everything from you. And he smashes the Jor-El crystal, and before Jor-El disappears, I love you, son. I'm like, oh no, because that's the thing. Like, maybe Clark will be able to find a way to repair that crystal. Jor-El might be gone forever. I mean, yeah, he's had these decades with his dad, but it's still like the person that you still felt a connection. It's like his dad was still alive with him. Like, hey, you're here for me. There are these, you couldn't physically be here, but there's a part of you, even if it's just this AI that is here, or who you are. Being here for me during such big moments in my life, and he won't have his dad to turn to about any questions about Jordan in the future, or, you know, any of that. And so, you know, in that moment, them like bashing all over the fortress, and it's just like, and just for like Ed Morgan just to like be punching him and be, like I said, it's just anger because it's like, it's unfair. Like, yes, it's all about Krypton, but I think on some level it's unfair that you had this great life and I didn't. It's been a struggle for me. You didn't have to struggle. Clark had his own struggles. Everyone struggles. Just, you know, it's not just a compare and contrast. It's like everyone goes through different struggles, but his, in his mind, are more severe. Like, I've been doing everything to bring our people back, and you've been selfish. You've been living this pathetic life. You weakened yourself. You've kind of like dumbed yourself down for these humans, and it's just like, I'm disgusted by it, and just is like, I'm gonna go pay your family a visit. Which, you know, there's a conversation, you know, Kyle, Lois, and Lana about, you know, like, right, what's the town gonna know? It's like, the DoD's gonna keep it secret about like the alien consciousnesses like possessing everyone. It's just, yeah, Morgan gave people superpowers, that's about it, but people are gonna want to know, going to want some answers sooner or later. So the question is, like, are they eventually going to tell everyone the truth? We'll have to wait and see. But Kyle's beating himself up because he's like, I'm the one to blame, because he's the one that like welcomed Morgan Edge into town, open arms. He's the one that convinced so many people. But for Lana, it's like, no, you were doing what was right. You were trying to, you know, you were speaking from your heart. It's like, heart or no heart. Like, I'm the reason why things kind of got to where they are. And so even Kyle apologizing to Lois, he's like, right, like, I was wrong about nearly everything, but mostly about you, you know? And she's like, it's okay. He's like, no, it's not. You tried to warn me about everything, but I wasn't willing to listen, but I am sorry. And, you know, honestly, I'm glad to have you be a part of this town. And she was like, thanks. You know, it's like finally getting embraced by Smallville, which kind of, Smallville, but more specifically, Kyle kind of rejecting her. But it's like, right, you're just a smart part of this town. We're glad to have you part of the family type of thing, you know? And obviously Sarah, like, dealing with, like, the aftermath of everything, finding out the truth. But it's like, oh, guys, thanks for telling me the truth. And it's like, yeah, we've just, you know, despite the craziness, we figured you deserved to know. But it's like, right, still haven't told her everything. But there's, like, this, yes, but still, it's like, we have our reasons for not telling you about the other thing. That's going to be a conversation later on. But, you know, Jordan's like, I'm so sorry, like, I didn't. And then Sarah kisses him like, I don't want to just be friends anymore. He's like, me neither. And I'm like, yay! But it leads to the conversation. We got that, you know, once again, when you tell someone, that's been an interesting conversation lately. Once again, just bringing up the Invincible conversation about, like, right, like, that's a prime example. Like, you know, I mean, obviously showcasing our other superhero shows. Like, when do you tell someone the truth about who you are? Different people did it at different points in time. I mean, Iris kind of found out on her own. So Barry didn't end up telling her. She kind of found out on her own. If I remember correctly, Felicity found out about Oliver on her own too, didn't she? I don't remember. Yeah, I think she stumbled across that. I don't think Oliver brought her into the fold. At least I don't think. I don't remember. I'm assuming Jeff, because we never got that story about when Jeff told Lynn. Like, we know that she's known for a long time about, you know, obviously him being Black Lightning and everything, and then he stopped for 9 years. But, like, beyond that, like, we never got that conversation about, like, how that necessarily went down. But regardless, it's just always an interesting conversation about when you have said conversation. So opens up the doorway to that, like, all right, you know, and obviously Jonathan being happy for Jordan, and obviously Lois being like, well, we're going to have to, you know, have some conversations about that. And Morgan shows up, you know, and threatens them, and Jonathan steps up to him, but obviously Jonathan's still kind of a fledgling when it comes to his powers, so Morgan has the advantage. He's got a couple decades on you, much like your dad does. And Lois is like, leave my sons alone. This is between you and me. Because he's like, this is your fault. You're the reason. You're what kind of weakened my brother and made him kind of like the helpless hap he is about humanity and stuff like that. You know, so... But before anything could happen, Clark shows up and he's like, please, I'll do anything. Just leave my family. He's like, then submit. He's like, okay. It's like, leave them alone and I will. And they're just like, no, Dad, don't do this. And Lois is like, please, Clark, don't. He's like... we needed more time. You know, I'm sorry. And honestly, that was a heartbreaking scene. And then Morgan grabs him and takes him to what we did find out was his fortress of solitude. I figured as much, like last episode when he was taking Leslie's. I was like, oh, that's got to be his fortress. You know, once again, the environment differences. The snow, kind of a snow tundra versus like the desert, the rocky desert or something like that. I think that's kind of interesting. And I think that just kind of speaks to just the different personalities that they are. Maybe you can make the argument like, right, Clark being the cool, little level-headed hero, whereas Morgan's the heated villain to a certain extent. Maybe you could draw some levels that maybe I'm drawing too much for it. But like I said, we learn like, his father rather is like, okay, like I need to teach you pain, because if you can withstand pain, like nothing can ever affect you. Basically break the weakness in you. Because it's like, oh, is there any other Kryptonians? It's like right there, weakness. You don't need anyone. And we started once again, we saw the parenting style. Jor-El led with love, whereas Morgan's dad led with hate. You know. Which is an interesting conversation. Once again, family conversation, because like The Flash, this particular episode dealt a lot with family. This episode of Superman and Lois dealing with family. I mean, it's all about family. Once again, interesting timing. It's been the showcase the entire time, but still, it's just interesting timing too. This week being, once again, Fast 9 coming out Friday. Regardless. But they're planning on breaking Superman. And it's like, right, they hit him with all that pain and stuff like that. And at one point we see Clark's eyes glow red, like, and, you know, Lois is calling John. And it's like, John, it's time. I think Superman's been turned. Now, the question is, I figured that was going to be I thought they were going to try and download a different consciousness into him. Because granted, they did have that device. So I was wondering, like, they do have the Eradicator. So I was wondering, like, if that was going to happen. Like, if they were going to implant a different personality into Clark. Who knows? Or maybe it was just kind of break his mind and rework it, maybe with the... who knows? We'll ultimately find out whether that's Clark playing along so he can get Morgan off guard, because Morgan not only could come after his family at any point in time, he could destroy his life by making his identity public. We could go full-blown spoilers, Far From Home with this, but who knows? But interesting, and like I said, heartbreaking development at the end. But I'm really interested to see where all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. I'm wondering, is it going to come out like, is Lois going to have no choice but to tell John, because John's going to be like, well, we're going to have to stop. It's like, no, we don't have to kill Superman. He was forced in this position. And it's like, why? And then maybe it'd be like, fine. Like, maybe Lois won't have any choice but to tell him to. It's like, the thing is, it's not her secret to tell. It's Clark. And Clark has to be the one to decide who he's going to tell it to. So, oh no, it's going to be interesting to see where those conversations take us next episode, because they're gonna have to bring Sam into the fold too, of like, right, Sam's biggest concerns. But I think his conversations with Jonathan in the past episodes might have shifted his perspective of like, no, like this is his son-in-law, so maybe he wants to try and do everything he can to protect his family. So we'll see how it all plays out. I'm excited to see what happens next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.